pushing it as far as being chair.
Good morning. The Elections Committee will come to order. Would the clerk please take the attendance?
Chair Cerniglia.
Here.
Representatives Wagella. Here. Hope.
Here.
Colazar.
Here.
Burns.
Here.
Churches.
Present.
Smith.
Present.
DeBoyer.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Representative Smith makes a motion to adopt the minutes from the September 26, 2023 meeting. Without objections, the minutes are adopted. For today's agenda, we will have testimony on House Bill 4981, which would require those running for sheriff to have served as a police or local corrections officer for at least 5 years. We will now have testimony from Representative Bigol, who is the sponsor of House Bill 4981. Welcome, Representative Bigol.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you to the members of the Election Committee for hearing testimony on House Bill 4981 today. As you heard from the chair, this is a bill that would require a sheriff's candidate to have at least 5 years experience with a Michigan Commission on Law Enforcement Officers standard, or as a correction officer to be certified by the Michigan Sheriff's Coordinating and Training Council. Constitutionally, a sheriff has to serve civil process and maintain the county jail as well as the care and custody of the inmates. But in many, many cases, there are so many other responsibilities, and I can speak for myself. I was in charge of the road patrol, animal control, the detective bureau, court security, emergency management, in the entire operation of Emergency 911, which dispatches all police and fire. So those are immense responsibilities for a sheriff to handle, and I was lucky to the fact that, I had started in the jail, I had done some dispatching, and I had 32 years of experience to draw on when important decisions needed to be made. Unlike many other states, Michigan does not have any standards to speak of as a police or for a sheriff, other than the fact you have to be a registered and qualified elector in the county. So I think that it's time that we take a look at this. I think when the Michigan Constitution was written, they didn't have MCOL standards. And almost every profession has some type of standard, whether you're an electrician, you need to be certified, whether it's a prosecutor or what have you. And this is really an accident waiting to happen. Can you imagine in your community if we had a tornado and the community was completely leveled and you have people who are injured or trapped and you have a sheriff on the scene with absolutely no experience? Okay, that sheriff, if he's there, is supposed to establish incident command. He's supposed to direct resources and manpower, rescue efforts, grid searches, whatever it may be. And even worse, I mean, we could have a situation where there's a hostage situation, we could have a school shooting, anything. And those deputies are gonna look to the sheriff for a command decision on what to do. And if you don't have somebody that knows what they're doing or can draw on the experience that I spoke of, it's an accident waiting to happen. Another point I'd like to make is I can't imagine that a city, a village, or a township would hire a guy off the street with absolutely no experience whatsoever to be their chief of police. It's unheard of. It wouldn't happen. And a county shouldn't be put in that position as well. Having a sheriff that lacks the understanding of proper law enforcement protocols and associated experience also creates a turmoil in the department, and I can speak firsthand to that. When you have a candidate that doesn't have any experience, it hurts morale. It jeopardizes the stability of that department. People would think about leaving if they had to work under somebody so inexperienced like that. So. I would also like to say that these are life and death situations, And this legislation is set to prevent a tragedy from happening. So I appreciate any consideration you'd give today on advancing the bill. Thank you, and I'd be open to any questions.
Thank you, Representative Bigol. We do have some questions from our committee. Representative Colazar.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your testimony. I do agree with you that, especially in terms of public safety, it's important to have that experience. Basic question is, are there any other elected positions you are aware of, other than age restrictions, any other elected positions in Michigan that do require some sort of merit?
Not in Michigan. Other states have very high standards for their sheriff, whereas Michigan doesn't have any other than being the registered and qualified voter in the district in which he lives.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We also have a question from Representative Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for being here to testify. I just discussed a couple of things, if I may. What would be pressing this legislation that we have, for the last 150 or so years? We've not done anything different with the constitutional and how our sheriffs are elected. Citizen oversight isn't really a bad thing, but the other thing is, do we have a lot of sheriffs, this is the second part of my question, currently that don't come from a background of law enforcement? I'd be interested in those numbers.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm only aware of one, and this does allow that he's been on the job, that he'd be grandfathered in. But I think that this legislation, more than anything, seeks to avert a situation, again, where you have a violent situation and you have somebody that doesn't have any experience on the scene, and because of that, we have a loss of life.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to note, I do think there are some offices, notably judge, clearly has a requirement that you are an attorney, and I have to believe prosecutor has a requirement that you're an attorney, although I don't know that for sure. I see a thumbs up back there. I can't imagine that it wouldn't, but just wanted to throw that in there as two things that I could think of. And I was going to ask, but I think you've already noted what happens to the people who might not fit those qualifications that are serving now. It was my understanding that those people would not be affected and they would be grandfathered in. Is that also yours?
Yes, ma'am,
Representative
that's
Bigol?
correct. So if there is a sheriff serving now, that they would be grandfathered in.
Thank you. We also have a question from Representative Burns.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Rep, for your testimony today. I appreciate you bringing this bill forward. Just to clarify, in your testimony, you've used the words he and guys when referring to candidates for sheriff. This would apply to women running for the position of sheriff as well, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yes,
thank
we
you so
currently
much.
have some wonderful sheriffs serving, especially in Kent County. Sheriff LaJoy Young, one of the most qualified in the state.
Good.
Thank
Glad to hear it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Representative Burns. We also have Representative DeBoyer.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Representative Bigol. Just a couple of quick questions. First thing is, yes, prosecuting attorneys and judges both have to be licensed in the state of Michigan as lawyers to qualify for those positions to be elected. So I think, that would probably tend to go towards your position that sheriff should have some law enforcement background. But how do you respond to the electorate who says, there's a lot of what goes on, well, when you're a sheriff, there's a lot of what goes on which is an administrative behavior, which is a management skill perhaps. And constitutionally, as you stated, road patrol is not a constitutional thing that the Sheriff's Department has to do. Theirs basically is maintain the county jail, right, and do the service. How do you make the argument to the electorate that we're going to restrict your choices for the person that might be managing the Sheriff's Department, right? We're going to take that restriction to a level beyond what it currently is constitutionally, if you don't mind, Representative.
Yeah, that's a great question. And in a perfect world, I'd say if somebody had some experience more on the managerial side of running a sheriff's office and the finances, that's great. But I can speak firsthand that doesn't always occur. In fact, I as sheriff have dealt with sheriffs in the UP especially, who are sometimes the only one on duty at the time for a very far distance, and I tried to meet up to pick up people on warrants, and they said, I'm sorry, I'm the only one on duty at the time. So in the smaller rural areas, I think you're going to find you can't just be restricted to those administrative duties. I mean, you're going to have to, at some point in time, you're probably going to be the first one on. You're living in the community. There's going to be, a fatal car crash or something. You're going to have some experience on how to handle that situation. So that's just nature of the beast when it comes to being the sheriff. I mean, you're gonna have to step up, and you're gonna have to be the first one on. You're gonna have to take charge of the situation.
All right. Thank you, Representative.
Thank you.
Representative Churches.
Thank you, Rep, for being here today. I just wanted to clarify, so the 5 years of experience, is this just seeking to make sure that people in these positions of power have a better comprehension of what the people they are serving and leading go through, so that they're able to give so that their service is more well-rounded and they are essentially having this qualification just gives them more experience and ensures that they are more equipped to do the job, so that we have candidates that are required to have this experience. Is that the goal of this bill?
Yep. That's a good question. You're absolutely right. It's actually a two-tier. So you have the experience on the job firsthand, and then you have very high standards that are set by the Michigan Commission on Law Enforcement Standards. And you go through that process, the police academy, and they teach numerous, it varies on the length, could be 16 to maybe 20-some weeks of education and handling different situations. So you have the in-classroom, that teaches you that, and then you have the on-the-job experience. So yes, we want professionalism throughout the state of Michigan for our sheriffs.
Why do you think this wasn't done before? Because this seems to make sense, to me, but I wonder why this hadn't been a previous requirement.
Well, I would say because we didn't have the Michigan Coalition on Law Enforcement Standards back when the Michigan Constitution was written, and so that is something that was developed later on. And I think it's an oversight until now that we realize, we have to have that professionalism with sheriffs, and we look at it that there are many careers that have minimum standards, and we think that sheriffs should be one of them also.
Well, thank you for your attention to detail in this and trying to better our system as a whole.
Thank you.
Representative DeBoyer has another question.
Thank you. Really quick. So, as I'm thinking about this, and I did read this bill when you originally brought it. With clerks, you do have to become accredited to be eligible to do certain things once you're elected. Would there be any potential entertainment that if you were elected to that position, that you have to meet these standards as opposed to the reverse? Just a thought, because that's how it works from the clerk's perspective, countywide.
Yeah, I don't think that's being entertained right now because can you imagine, I guess, a sheriff on day one? Let's take, the Wayne County Sheriff. I mean, you better perform. I mean, what are you going to do on day one? And so I don't think there's time for on-the-job training, so to speak, and your years of education through MCOLs and your experience on the job hopefully prepare you for that. But walking right into a job and saying that you can do it is not something I think most people in Michigan would agree with.
Thank you, Representative DeBoyer, for your testimony. We will now have testimony from Dan Fannis, who is the Deputy Director for the Michigan Sheriff's Association. Welcome, Mr. Fannis.
Good morning, Madam Chair. If you don't mind, I'm going to read from some prepared remarks, and then I'll be available for questions if anyone has some. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Dan Fannis. By way of background, I've been involved in law enforcement for 41 years. I began my career with the City of Westland Police Department, where I worked for 25 years, and I retired after 4 years of service as its Chief of Police, and was immediately appointed to the position of Undersheriff for the Wayne County Sheriff's Office by then Sheriff Warren C. Evans. I held that position for 15 years, being appointed as Undersheriff for 3 consecutive sheriffs. I also served as sheriff twice during times in which the office was temporarily vacant. I retired in 2021 to take the position of Deputy Director for the Michigan Sheriff's Association. As a body, the Michigan Sheriff's Association represents the collective interests of Michigan's 83 elected sheriffs. Today, I appear before you to offer supportive testimony for House Bill 4981. This bill would require that a person seeking to be elected to the office of sheriff would have at least 5 years of service as an M. Coles licensed police officer or 5 years of service as a Michigan Sheriff's Coordinating Training Council certified local corrections officer. The office of sheriff is unique. It was first established in Michigan in 1835 with the adoption of our first Constitution, and it has remained enshrined in each successive Constitution. The sheriff is the only law enforcement officer that is elected by the people of his or her community. The office of sheriff is granted a great amount of authority and responsibility by virtue of Michigan's compiled laws. The duties run the gamut from enforcing the laws of the state to being responsible for the health, safety, and welfare of the inmates that are being held in the county jail. The Michigan Sheriff's Association believes it would be very beneficial to the person seeking office of sheriff and to the residents of the community at large, the county, for a candidate for the office of sheriff to have law enforcement or correctional experience. We lived in a simpler time when the office of sheriff was first established. Since then, life has become more complicated, and the world we live in has required, if not demanded, that law enforcement continues to evolve as a profession. It seems hard to believe that officers that preceded my career in law enforcement, only a generation before me, were not legally required to attend a police academy prior to being issued a gun and badge. We've evolved greatly since those days. Now police officers are required to be licensed by Michigan Commission on Law Enforcement Standards, and corrections officers are required to be certified by the Michigan Sheriff Coordinating and Training Council. Most law enforcement agencies won't even allow an officer to test for the position of sergeant until they've attained 4 or 5 years of service as an officer. The office of sheriff is highly visible and an important office. It is so important that a candidate that desires to hold it should have gained enough professional experience at a minimum to realize what the demands of that office are. It is imperative that the wants of an individual that doesn't possess the appropriate training and experience to hold that position do not outweigh the needs of the office, the law enforcement officers that provide public safety, and the community members for which it is tasked to serve. It is with that thought in mind that we ask you to support the passage of House Bill 4981. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Fanis, and I apologize for mispronouncing that. As someone with a hard-to-pronounce last name, I'm rather embarrassed. Looks like we do have some questions. Representative Wagella.
Hi, thank you for your testimony today. My question is, have there been discussions as to how this type of legislation might impact underrepresented candidates such as women and people of color, knowing that the policescape has changed over the last several decades here? Has there been any conversation about that?
Representative, I would say that holistically, there's always conversation about diversifying our ranks. In fact, I'd like to showcase that the Wayne County Sheriff's Office, for example, is absolutely a poster child for this. In the ranks of the Wayne County Sheriff's Office, our minority population represents 55% of the officers that work there, and our female staff is 25% of the officers that work there. Not only do we have officers at the rank and file level, we have officers in the supervisory roles and in upper levels of administration. We believe that's imperative for successful operations of the office. Undoubtedly, when I started this profession decades ago, it was a male-dominated environment. It was mostly white males. Quite honestly, we engage in more recruitment efforts now to bring on members of underrepresented communities than have ever existed in the past. And so it's not been part of this particular discussion, but it's absolutely been part of the holistic process for which we try and diversify our sheriff's offices to represent the communities that they serve.
Thank you. I have a couple questions. So just to kind of clarify on some of the, so we have right now, I assume, a robust number of people who are running for sheriff, when election time comes. Is there any concern that we won't have enough people to meet these requirements, or just from, what you've seen personally or if you have any particular stats on that, like?
I don't have any particular stats. My information is more life's experience and anecdotal. I would say that there's never a shortage of individuals that believe that they're qualified to hold the office of sheriff. I can tell you that when I worked for an esteemed sheriff, Benny Ann Napoleon, a man that I loved deeply, and his passing was just shocking to our community, that despite the fact that he was a pillar of the community, despite the fact that I don't think there was a person that didn't know who he was. There was a young man by the name of T-Pay Nakoriak, a convicted felon in his 20s, no life experience at all related to law enforcement, that actually believed he should be sheriff and ran against Benny Napoleon. So I think there's individuals from all sorts of positions in life that believe they're qualified. I don't think there will ever be a shortage of people that seek that office.
Thank you. And then one more question. So do you think that this will actually improve public safety by having these requirements?
I believe it absolutely will. I think there's been a demand by the public, as I stated in my remarks, that law enforcement become more of a professional, business-like operation. And we strive at the Michigan Sheriff's Office to provide that education to our sheriffs and their staffs, et cetera. I mean, there's an ongoing process towards development. We're a service-related industry that has to evolve over time. And we believe that the experience qualifications are critical to that evolution.
Thank you, Mr. Fanas. I don't see any further questions, so thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And we will now have virtual testimony from the Sheriff, Anthony Wickersham from Macomb County. Welcome, Sheriff Wickersham.
Well, good morning, and thank you for allowing me to testify here on this House Bill 4981. So, by way of history, I've been here at the Sheriff's Office for 37 years. I worked in the jail as a corrections officer for 4 years before I was promoted. I went to a police academy and worked the road patrol. I did some undercover work, and then I was promoted and in supervision and investigations for the remainder of my career before being appointed sheriff in 2011 and successfully winning office in 12, 16, and 20. 24 years prepared me, not for everything to be sheriff, but it did prepare me to handle the daily responsibilities that a sheriff faces 24/7, 365 days a year. So why should somebody be licensed or experienced? Because you need somebody that understands the job. Somebody that's going to be able to make sound policies. Remember, the policies direct the operation of the organization. Sound policies tell our deputies, our police officers, how to do their job. You have to have an understanding of policies and procedures that are going on. You have to be able to lead and direct personnel in any situation. Having that training and experience helps making the office of sheriff a more reputable and understanding office. Now, as leaders, we all hope to surround ourselves with good people, because the people that are around you and my executive staff are the men and women that are doing the job when I'm not around. So having the law enforcement license from MCOLS and experience and having that corrections experience ensures that the people around you are doing the right thing and not going outside the lines. You have to understand state laws and local ordinances. Understand constitutional rights. Again, as a constitutional office, we have to make sure that we are enforcing the laws within the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of Michigan. As you know, the Office of Sheriff, we have many, many lawsuits, and that first name on every lawsuit is always the sheriff. And that sheriff has to be able to defend himself or herself in time of litigation and has to have understanding of policies, procedures, and why things happened. Down here in Southeast Michigan, we are a contracted law enforcement agency. I am the police chief for 6 communities here in Macomb County. Those mayors, township supervisors, village presidents, and council members expect me to be able to have an understanding of law enforcement, of corrections. They're putting their trust in the sheriff's office. They're putting their trust in the sheriff to lead and be that police agency for those communities. If you look all your local police chiefs, when they're hired, they're certified law enforcement officers. That's a prerequisite to get the job. Same thing in corrections. Corrections, somebody that has done the job, somebody that understands prisoners' rights, understands mental health issues inside of jail, substance abuse issues, suicide awareness, having supervisors that can lead the men and women inside a correctional facility. You have to have that understanding and that knowledge. As was brought up, I think in prior testimony, we also oversee communication centers. I'm doing 911 dispatching for 2 large communities on a contract basis, the city of Sterling Heights and the city or the township of Clinton, huge communities that have entrusted their 911 response to the sheriff of Macomb County. And I believe that when those decisions were made, they looked at the credentials of the sheriff to see if they would be able to get the job done. So it is my belief that training and education is an important prerequisite to the position of sheriff. I know it was brought up. The prosecutor needs a law license. So wouldn't you want your sheriff to be licensed and well-trained? Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Sheriff Wickersham. Do we have any questions from the committee? We have no further questions, so thank you for joining us and providing that testimony. And I will now read some cards into the record. We have a card from Sherry Ritchie from Pure Integrity Michigan Elections, Michigan Fair Elections, Stand Up Michigan, and the Freedom Alliance. Ms. Ritchie is neutral on 4981 in opposition to 4983, 84, 85, and 86. We also have a card from Darlene Hennessy from Election Integrity Network, and unfortunately I can't read the Rescue Michigan, it looks like. And Ms. Hennessy is in opposition to 4981, 83, 84, 85, and 86. And we have cards from Secure Democracy in support of House Bill 4983, and a card from Eric Wellsby from the Detroit Disability Power in support of 4983. Thank you. Thank you, Representative Bigol. We're going to move on to another matter at this time. We appreciate you being here with us today. We are now going to consider some substitutes on HB 4983. The first substitute clarifies an effective date of June 30th, 2025 in order to provide the Secretary of State adequate time to implement the secure automatic voter registration system. The second substitute bill clarifies what happens when a driver's license applicant has not provided proof of U.S. citizenship or non-citizenship as part of their license application. This category of people does not currently exist under Michigan license application rules, but it could exist in the future, and federal law requires a voter registration opportunity for people in this situation. The substitute bill clarifies that people in this category are not subject to any form of automatic voter registration, but will instead receive a less streamlined registration opportunity in order to still comply with federal law. Third, at the request of the clerks, in addition to Section 493A2, requires the Secretary of State to develop procedures for people who have previously declined registration under the secure automatic voter registration system. For example, to address the potential situation where an individual is repeatedly indicating that they declined voter registration by mailing back the declination notice. Representative Wagella makes a motion to adopt substitute H1 to HB 4983. Mr. Clerk, please call the vote.
On the motion to adopt the substitute, Chair Cerniglu.
Yes.
Representatives Wagella,
Yes.
Hope,
Yes.
Colazar,
Yes.
Burns,
Yes.
Churches.
Yes.
Schmidt,
No.
DeBoyer.
No.
Madam Chair, you have 6 yeas, 2 nays, 0 passes. Substitute is adopted.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Representative Hope makes a motion to report HB 40, no, I'm sorry. Yes. Or, one moment. Representative Hope makes a motion to report HB 4983 with recommendation. Mr. Clerk, please call the vote.
On the motion to report, Chair Cerniglu,
Yes.
Representatives Wagella,
Yes.
Hope,
Yes.
Colazar,
Yes.
Burns,
Yes.
Churches,
Yes.
Schmidt,
No.
DeBoyer.
No.
Madam Chair, you have 6 yeas, 2 nays, 0 pass. HB 4983 is reported recommendation. Substitute H1.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Representative Colzar makes a motion to adopt substitute H1 to HB 4984. Mr. Clerk, please call the vote.
On the motion to adopt the substitute, Chair Cerniglu,
Yes.
Representatives Wagella,
Yes.
Hope,
Yes.
Colazar,
Yes.
Burns,
Yes.
Churches,
Yes.
Schmidt,
No.
DeBoyer.
No.
Madam Chair, you have 6 yeas, 2 nays, 0 pass. The substitute is adopted.
Representative Burns makes a motion to report HB 4984 with recommendation. Mr. Clerk, please call the vote.
Motion to report, Chair Cerniglu,
Yes.
Representatives Wagella,
Yes.
Hope,
Yes.
Colazar,
Yes.
Burns,
Yes.
Churches,
Yes.
Schmidt,
No.
DeBoyer.
No.
Madam Chair, you have 6 yeas, 2 nays, 0 pass. HB 4984 is reported recommendation. Substitute H1.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Representative Churches makes a motion to adopt substitute H1 to HB 4985. Mr. Clerk, please call the vote.
On the motion to adopt the substitute, Chair Cerniglu,
Yes.
Representatives Wagella,
Yes.
Hope,
Yes.
Colazar,
Yes.
Burns,
Yes.
Churches,
Yes.
Schmidt,
No.
DeBoyer.
No.
Madam Chair, you have 6 yeas, 2 nays, 0 pass. The substitute is adopted.
Representative Wagella makes a motion to report HB 4985 with recommendation. Mr. Clerk, please call the vote.
On the motion to report, Chair Cerniglu,
Yes.
Representatives Wagella,
Yes.
Hope,
Yes.
Colazar,
Yes.
Burns,
Yes.
Churches,
Yes.
Schmidt,
No.
DeBoyer.
No.
Madam Chair, you have 6 yeas, 2 nays, 0 pass. HB 4985, support the recommendation. Substitute H1.
Representative Hope makes a motion to adopt substitute H1 to HB 4986. Mr. Clerk, please call the vote.
On the motion to adopt the substitute, Chair Cerniglu,
Yes.
Representatives Wagella,
Yes.
Hope,
Yes.
Colazar,
Yes.
Burns,
Yes.
Churches,
Yes.
Schmidt,
No.
DeBoyer.
No.
Madam Chair, you have 6 yeas, 2 nays, 0 pass. The substitute is adopted.
Representative Colazar makes a motion to report HB 4986 with recommendation. Mr. Clerk, please call the vote.
On the motion to report, Chair Cerniglu,
Yes.
Representatives Wagella,
Yes.
Hope,
Yes.
Colazar,
Yes.
Burns,
Yes.
Churches,
Yes.
Schmidt,
No.
DeBoyer.
No.
Madam Chair, you have 6 yeas, 2 nays, 0 pass. HB 4986, reported recommendation. Substitute H1.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. There being no further business before the committee will stand adjourned.